For some reason, I thought it would be a great idea to start another Warhammer 40k video. So in this video, I'm going to be batch printing and painting a whole boatload of Imperial Guard. And it's going to be quite the adventure. So to support me with this stupid project, Resin very kindly sponsored this video, and I'll be using their printers to get everything 3D printed and then ready for the tabletop. Now, the reason I was so drawn to doing some Imperial Guard type stuff is because Station Forge recently have been doing some incredible sculpts. Not even just recently, for quite some time they've been doing loads and loads of stuff. So I picked up a whole bunch of their Grimguard sculpts, got them downloaded, thrown into the slicer, and then popped over onto the printers. So the first thing to do was to get everything printed. And for this, I'm using the Frozen Mega 8KS, which is a big beastie machine, so I could get as many things popped onto the plate as absolute possible. Now, a normal person would use something like the Frozen Mighty or like the Revo, basically they're mid-size ones, or you could even probably get away with the Mini, because most normal people probably wouldn't be printing off this many things in one go. But having that massive build plate just helps to get everything kind of going, and basically you don't have to do loads and loads of build plates. I think it took me about 2 or 3 things to get this done, and then I was pretty much off to the races. Once everything was printed, it was over to the wash stage, and for this now I'm using a 2-stage wash. So I have like the really big wash station by Frozen, which is just filled with my dirtier IPA, so basically everything goes in there first, gets cleaned up, and then it goes into one of the smaller wash stations, which has like the really clean alcohol instead. And it just saves me having to constantly change it and everything else like that, and it gets me nice, clean prints, which then go over to remove the supports. And then once the supports are off and everything's nice and dry, it's over to get them cured. And then we move on to the fun bit, which is going to be painting, which is going to take quite a while. Okay, so everything has been removed off the supports, and it's all come out pretty good, apart from the tanks. So when I was putting the tanks on Lychee, I noticed some of them were slightly raised up, so I used the auto place on plate function in Lychee, and apparently it decided to put the whole thing on the plate. So all the tanks and basically all the weapon pieces and everything else were just cured like slightly into the plate. So some of them I might be able to salvage, but I don't think so. What I am going to do though is, like I said in another video, whenever you get like failed prints, and although this technically isn't a failed print, it's more of a failed slice, but whenever you get anything like this, you may as well still use it because you've got all these pieces. I may as well make some like fun terrain or something like that. So let's make this project a little bit harder. So once they were all cured, it was time to get them painted. And I just went for a nice undercoat of black using my airbrush. And then once that had all dried, I just went back in there with a dry brush and I dry brushed them all with some white over the top of it. Now this probably would have been faster had I ever gone for like a Zenithal Prime using the airbrush and got some white from above, but I quite like that dry brushed white style. I think it just adds a little bit more, I don't know, grittiness and I guess grim darkness. So for something like your Imperial Guard that are going to be down in the trenches and basically cannon fodder, I just think it feels a little bit more fitting for them. Okay, so I have dry brushed like all the 100 of these Grimguard soldiers, and this has been a process so far. Now, the key to doing any kind of project like this is to have a plan, and I don't have one as I go into this. I have gone back and forth on the colors so many times. Originally, I was thinking I'll do them all in black to match the first batch of like Helldivers that I did, but I don't want to do that. And then I thought, oh, I could do them all in brown, and then I thought maybe red. And I want to keep them quite dull because I've been doing some Blood Angels, so obviously there were loads of bright red and stuff like that. The Tower that I'm doing next, I'm going to be doing in like really bright yellow because I'm really excited about that. And then all my Tyranids are also really, really bright. There are lots of bright greens and stuff. So these need to be kind of dull just to be a bit different. And because, you know, they're 40k Grimguard, Imperial Guard, or whatever we're calling them, and they just don't have a chance. They really are down in the trenches and stuff. So I want to keep them dull. I'm thinking I'm going to go over them all with like a green. So they've all been dry brush white over the top now, which was an undertaking. And I wanted that because it really keeps a lot of the blacks in there. So that black undercoat, if I'd gone over it with an airbrush, I'd probably wipe out a lot of that. And they'd end up being quite a bright green, but I want them to look dark and dull and drudgy and all of that. So dry brushing allows me to get some really good contrast in there. So I'm going to go in with like either contrast paints or speed paints. I've not decided on the green I'm going to go for yet. And then I'm going to go for that camo thing that I did a little while ago on my scouts on the cloak, because I really like the look of that. I don't know how it will turn out, and this could be an absolute disaster. Yeah, I guess we'll find out. With the vehicles, I'm not sure yet, so I'm probably just going to dry brush them all white and then go for the same colour that I'm doing on these to give them all like that green, and then maybe go for exactly the same style as the soldiers and like sponge on the camo, and then maybe dry brush them all with silver afterwards to like pick out some like damage and stuff. I don't know how that'll turn out, so here we go. Over to the paintbrush, I guess. Okay, so we are done with day one of painting. I've pretty much got all of the base coats and everything down at the moment on these. I've got 2 squads almost completely done. And I've decided to go against doing the sponging camouflage and stuff, because I actually really like the way the green has turned out for these. So the 2 squads that are done, basically all the weapons are done, all the faces and stuff like that. I just now need to go back in there with washes and pick out things like the face to get some like depth in there, and on the weapons to get some Nuln Oil on there, just to kind of, again, to get some more depth. And then I'll go back in and add a few more extra highlights and colours. And then I need to finish up the rest of them. For the command group, I've gone for something slightly different. So everyone else is green, but my command group and my elite group, they're all black. And I really like the way these are starting to look, because they just stand out a bit more. The command group, I'm also giving them a lot of red and gold trim as well to help those stand out. We'll see how that goes. But I painted a lot of infantry, so I want to try messing around with these tanks. And like I mentioned at the start of the video, just a weird thing, the slicer messed up. So it wasn't the printer, it was the slicer, and they've now got these kind of blocks at the front here. And they don't actually stand out too bad in the end, but I want to do something different. So I've got all this like basing material and stuff I've been using on trees, and it's like a I don't know, tree canopy type thing with all moss and everything. And I figured, why not put that around the tank to make it really look like it's trying to camouflage in and everything. And we'll see how that turns out. And my thoughts behind that are is to blend that in with the rest of the units. It's got the same sort of like base coat for them, but I'm going to try and blend the camouflage that's on this with the bases on these, because they actually look quite nice on these like black rocky bases. But I figured what I can do is on all the black rocky bases, I'll add some like rock texture and loads of like bits of green, like tufts and maybe some foliage. So it looks like they're all running through either like ruined jungle city. I'm trying to think of how that's all going to blend in, but ideally the camouflage and like texture that's on this will then blend in with the texture that's on the bases for the units. It might not work, but we will soon find out. But I'm really happy with how these are turning out so far. So on with day 2. Okay, so I am now putting this together, and I'm kind of regretting my choice. So I'm using some PVA just to kind of like slap on there to then stick it on. I'm not entirely sure if this just looks too big and clumpy. So with this stuff, it comes out like that, and it's this like Geek Gaming Scenics bits, and they're really good on trees. But I found that you've got to kind of pull it quite far apart, and it gets all over the place. It's not looking too bad when you really get some separation on there, because then it's looking like it's got all these mossy vine bits all over it. It looks a bit more natural. So that's definitely one thing. I think it's starting to look a bit better, but I don't know. I just need to make sure I cover up those awful bits. But then I also need to leave enough stuff on the tank to show through. The other thing that I've got to consider is that I haven't actually done any detail bit on the tank. So I've got all like my base coat and stuff like that down on here. And the reason I've not done anything else yet is because I kind of figure there's no point in painting loads and loads of detail and like highlight and stuff if I'm then just going to go over it with this, and it's all going to get lost. So it's kind of just pop it on there, and I don't know, we'll see. You know, I figured it covers up those bits where I had the issue, and hopefully it'll look normal by the time I'm done with it. I don't know, it's looking okay so far. I think less is more with this. Originally I was going to have loads and loads of cover, but then it kind of looked stupid. So, like I said, I think less is more, he says, whilst putting loads of it on there. But yeah, I think it makes a bit more sense when there's not quite as much all over it. And then what I'll do is, once I've done this, I'll seal it in with one of my varnishes. That always seems to kind of give it a really nice, like, plasticky feel afterwards. And it just works on the paint as well, so we will see. I should have started this on something smaller while I could test a broken piece. Okay, so we are on to a new day, and I'm almost done with all of this. So the tanks are pretty much done. There's a few extra bits I need to do on these. So the bit I'm struggling with at the moment is that obviously they've got all this camo and stuff on there, and I don't want to add too many like splashes of color, because then that defeats the thematic thing that I'm going for. But then if I don't do that, then they look kind of like a block of green. So like the missile on top, I've gone for red. I need to probably put a bit more colour on there, and maybe like some bronzes and stuff as well, just to mix and match the metals rather than too many splashes of colour. I actually really like the way these have turned out. At first, I wasn't keen on them, but now that they're kind of coming together, they look like a tank that is camouflaged, whereas beforehand it looked like a toy that I'd put loads of moss on the top of. So that's turning out all right. Pretty much all of the soldiers are now done as well. So I was torn between the bases because obviously they're all in green, and my usual basing for like Imperial Guard type stuff is like sandy, but then they're all in green. They probably should be trying to camouflage in with everything that they're doing. So I've gone for this like base texture, again by Geek Gaming Scenics. It's really nice because it's such a mix of different like bits of grass, bits of gravel, and then some really nice kind of like themed rocks. And I don't normally like using just real rocks unless you paint them, but actually these look really nice. So I'm really happy with the way that's turned out. And all I do is I take some like watered down PVA, a pipette, spread it on there, and then sprinkle all the bits on it. And then just to kind of seal it all in, I add a bit more of the watered down PVA on with my pipette just to soak it all in, and it just binds it all to the base, and it makes it really easy to do and get into all those like hard to reach bits, which is quite handy. So for all the faces, I always go for just really simple and easy to do skin, and I think it ends up looking pretty effective with like no effort at all. So I use this Andrea colour, and I just do one coat of this, and then I go back in there with some Reichland Flesh Shade, and I mix it with Speed Paint Medium, or basically any medium you've got on hand. I do like a 50-50 mix of that. And that way, if you go on with just pure Reichland Flesh Shade, I always find it's too dark. And then you have to go back in with the base colour or a lighter flesh colour and like lighten it all up. But if you mix it with like a medium, it just makes it so much nicer. And it gets into all the recesses, but it leaves all the high points as well, so you don't need to do too much work afterwards. So it's a really nice speed hack to get flesh done very quickly when you're doing lots of units and stuff like that. Now, I've got loads of lenses to do. I'm really torn with what colour to go for the lenses. I almost feel like they should be like quite a nice bright light green, and that will mix in with the camo and it could look quite interesting. But then I'm also thinking, do I go for reds? Like some really dark and bright reds in there for the lenses? Or do I go for blue? Because for like their power weapons and the power claw and stuff like that, I've gone for blue. So I'm kind of thinking the energy on these guys, so whatever power they're using will be like a blue light source, and blue would go quite nicely with the greens. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. And then the last thing I'll need to do is these trucks. So for the trucks, they've basically been done exactly the same as all the troops and the tanks, and I've just sponged some bits of silver onto these. I think it's a really simple and effective way of doing vehicles, is literally just going with the base colour and then getting some silver and sponging it on, and it looks like some really nice chipping and damage and stuff like that. So on with the new day, and I should have these done in a couple of hours. So here we go. So the final bit of painting was nice and quick. I decided to go for red lenses in the end after kind of toying back and forth between them. And for this, I did my little speed hack, or at least I feel like it's a speed hack. Basically, you paint all of the eye lenses white first, let that dry, and then go back in there with whatever color that you want to go for. So you can either use a contrast paint or a speed paint and mix it 50-50 with some medium. And basically that flows really, really nicely. So you end up with loads of like, I guess, darkness around the outside of the lenses with the same color but a thinner consistency across the middle, which is then a more bright white instead. Pretty easy way to do it. It's hard to make mistakes with it, so you don't have to worry too much, and it looks pretty effective. Once all of that was done, I just did a couple of highlights of extra bright green. So once that was done, I did a couple of extra highlights across all of the models, added a few touches of color onto the trucks as well, and then I went onto the bases and rimmed them all black, and at that point, we are done. And I'm really happy with the way this turned out. It took me 3 days to get the whole thing done, and that was back and forth between work and obviously painting as well. And it wasn't overly difficult. It would have probably been easier if I had done a few test prints and paint jobs beforehand, but because I didn't, I was then constantly going back and forth, I guess doubting myself, because I was thinking I'd go for brown for the coat, and then I was thinking I'd have them all as black. So because of that, I was constantly doubting where I was going to go with the paint scheme. But in the end, I'm really happy with the way these turned out. The speed paints and contrast paint combination, I just think makes it so much faster. And actually all the colors really pop and they look really nice and vibrant, despite them being like contrast paint and speed paint. So really happy with the end results here. It's a whole host of them, and I'm definitely tempted to do some more as well. I really like the way the tanks turned out. Like I said earlier in the video, I was kind of doubting that as well, because it just looked like a toy with some moss on top of it. But once I started to get some extra bits of color in there, some of the chipping and stuff, I think they ended up turning out pretty good. And all in all, once they're all based and everything was looking consistent and had that theme going throughout them, I think they've turned out really well. I'm very happy. So I'll probably be doing some more of these. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And thank you so much to Frozen for sponsoring this mad project. I've had an absolute blast with it, and the printers helped me again to get some really great looking miniatures and get them all painted up, and very quickly. It only took me about a day to get the whole thing printed, and then it was just a couple of days to get it all painted as well. So all in all, fast, easy project. Hope you've enjoyed that video. Fingers crossed I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.